Samantha, thank you. Local healthcare provider is giving guidance on taking Tylenol today after President Trump announced on Monday that taking acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, during pregnancy can be associated with what he calls a very increased risk of autism. Prevea Healthcare posting a statement on social media saying they are moving forward with, quote, guidance from professional societies. Prevea also posting a statement from the president of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists saying in part, quote, in more than 2 decades of research on the use of acetaminophen in pregnancy, not a single reputable study has successfully concluded that the use of acetaminophen in any trimester of pregnancy causes neurodevelopmental disorders in children, end quote. That statement going on to talk about a study that was published last year found no significant associations between acetaminophen during pregnancy and mental disabilities.